House of Tricks.
Do I get to be red like you now that I'm grown up? Mia followed her mom's tail through the vole fields, trying to examine her own dusty brown paws. She thought her fur might be changing color, but her paws wouldn't hold still long enough for her to tell. Red fur will come with time, her mom said. Oh, Mia blinked. What about my eyes? Is the blue gone yet? Her mom stopped walking just long enough to give Mia's nose a lick. Not yet, dear heart. Now come along. Okay. Mom slipped through the wind-woven vines, and Mia followed, nosing through the tangle until the leaves came to an abrupt end and the world opened like a gasp. The sky beamed upon an emerald meadow. A soft wind blew pale stripes across the grass, sweeping as far as Mia's eyes could see. Whoa, she said, then caught an itch behind her ear. Do I have to have babies? That's not for many months yet, her mom said. She slipped into the meadow's high grasses, leading them down a shadowy passage. And then only if you want them. Where do I get them even? Mia asked. Her mom was distracted, sniffing for danger. Busy says babies grow on a blackberry bush in winter, Mia continued, and you have to pick them very carefully or they'll pop and get milk all in your mouth. Busy said that, did she? Yeah, but I could tell she was faking. Mia sneezed when a blade of grass poked her in the nostril. Was she faking? Yes, her mom said. If you want kits, then, well, they'll come to you. Mia imagined a small bundle sailing in from the horizon on a fluffy dandelion seed. She imagined the bundle landing before her paws and unfolding into a squirming pink litter. Do I ever have to eat grasshoppers again? She asked. The questions persisted as Mia and her mom crossed the meadow, keeping hidden in the thicker patches. Every so often her mom stopped and lifted a paw, sniffing back the way they'd come. Mia lifted a paw and sniffed too. What are we looking for? She whispered. Shh, her mom said, ears alert. Mia waited patiently until her mom set down her paw and continued on. It felt strange traveling away from the Evie wood, away from the kindly sights and scents, the soil and leaves that crunched familiar underpaw. It was strange knowing that she would not be returning to the den that night to curl up in a fuzzy pile with her brothers and sisters. The thought pinched something in Mia, and she gazed back through the grasses, past the hills and the valleys, toward home. Eyes ahead, Mia, my love, her mom said. Foxes don't look back to their kithood then once they've grown. They have to show the other kits, the ones who didn't pass the test, what it means to be brave. Her mom's voice caught like it had hooked on a thorn. Okay, Mama, Mia said. She nibbled an itch from her tail where Miss Vix's teeth had plucked the hairs, and then bounded after her mom's sweet apple scent. As dusk dusted the horizon, Mia and her mother arrived at the mouth of a forest. The trees bristled and smelled of sap. Their needles clawed the sky. Her mom bounded into the woods, dissolving in shadow. But Mia's bottom plopped on a mossy hump. Her paws refused to budge. Fox eyes weren't meant for forests. Every kid knew that. We keep to the edge of things, Miss Vix had told Mia and her siblings. Between field and forest, between meadow and wood. There you'll find places for hiding. The rodents and insects are as plentiful as stars, and the sky is thrown so wide you'll smell a hawk or a hunter approaching from miles away. Mia, her mom's voice said from the shadows. Mia whimpered, then bit her tongue, remembering she was grown up now. Her mom bounded out of the trees and tried to nuzzle Mia's chin, but Mia couldn't stop staring into the forest. Darling, her mom said in a calm voice, once we make it to the other side of the trees, we can hunt and rest. Even though she wasn't supposed to, Mia looked back the way they'd come. She'd feel a lot better if she could just tease Roa one last time. Tackle Marley, chew on Alfie's ear. Why can't we just go back to the Evie wood? She asked. Because, her mom snapped. I said so. Mia's ears flattened, and her mom's eyes filled with guilt. I'm sorry, Mia. This isn't your fault. She sniffed at the trees. This forest is shallow. I can smell a peach grove on the other side. Ooh, and it has a centipede infestation. Mia's belly gurgled. Centipedes were her favorite food, especially when found in an overripe peach. Come now, her mom said, bounding back into the trees. You're too big for carrying. But. Mia's paws kneaded the dirt. What if the yellow stench was in there? Her mom had told her it was all a test, but she couldn't quite make herself believe it. What if the yellow was watching from the shadow, with its gooey eyes and dripping saliva, waiting to bite her tail again? There came a sigh, and then her mom trotted back into the light of dusk. Okay, Mia, you win. We'll go around the long way. Really? Mia's bottom came unstuck from the ground, and she followed her mom east along the edge of the forest. For real? Yes. You've talked me into it. I've lost enough kits today. Mia's heart squeezed. What do you mean, lost? We know where they are. They're with Miss Fix in the Evie Wood. Of course, her mom said, not meeting Mia's eyes. I'll go back for them once we find our new den. She trotted a little faster. Will I get to see them again? Mia asked, leaping to catch up. Her mom didn't answer any more questions for a while. As the sky went softly to sleep, Mia and her mom traced the shadows that wobbled along the edge of the pines. Soon, they came to an odd sight that stopped her mom in her tracks. The thing looked like a river, but it had no water or stones, and it wasn't running. It lay flat and black along the forest edge, as straight as a frightened tail. What's that? Mia asked, sniffing. A road, her mom said, eyes wide with fear. We must leave this place now. Mia looked back into the forest, the only other place to go. But Mama! End of argument. Mia clamped her muzzle shut, catching a whimper. Her mom crept into the trees, and Mia followed as night fell and the shadows closed around them. The path through the forest was twisted and bumpy and barely lit by starlight. Mia tripped over sticks and stepped into holes and was poked in the eyes by leaves. She had to squint to see her mom's tail. She desperately wanted to latch her muzzle onto it, but she fought the urge. She wasn't a kit anymore. Just when Mia thought the trees would never end, they arrived in a clearing. Mia blinked. Branches swayed against a starry sky. The ground was littered with silver roots. Did we make it? She asked, her heart hopping with relief. Is this the other side? No, honey, her mom said, sniffing. I'm afraid we still have a ways to go. She bounded over one silver root and slid under another. She sniffed the air, took another step, and crack! She leapt into the air with a scream. A silver root had bitten her paw. Snake! Mia shouted. She bounded and snapped the thing up in her mouth, but its skin was as solid as stone and woke the nerves in her teeth. Her mom jumped and jerked and spun, trying to escape. Mia shook the silver thing's body with her muzzle, but its jaws clung tight. Her mom slumped onto her side, paws still trapped. Mia, she said, her voice shaking. Mia, it isn't a snake. The silver thing hung cold and heavy in Mia's mouth. She let it drop with a clink. She sniffed at the circles of its body, its toothless jaws, her mom's paw all smashed up inside. Mama, what is it? Her mom shifted her paws, sucking through her teeth. I don't know. Mia scratched at it. Is it dead? I don't think it was ever alive. Then, Mia swallowed, then how are we going to kill it? Her mom didn't answer. She nibbled at her trapped paw, trying to pull it free, but the silver jaws held fast and she let out a whimper. Mia's ears lay flat. She'd never heard her mom make that noise before. Here, Mia, her mom said. Stick your nose in the narrow part of its mouth. Maybe we can force it open by... A branch snapped in the darkness. A light flashed across the leaves. Mia and her mom crouched low as a creature bigger than anything Mia had seen before stepped between the trees. "What tricks await Beatrixes, hmm?" The voice was high and twisted and squirmed in Mia's ears. Mia's mom limped beneath a nearby bush, dragging the silver root with her. Mia slipped in after her and sniffed toward the creature. It smelled of nothing. "Mama," she whispered. "What is it?" "Quiet," her mom said, breathless. Heavy steps crunched through the underbrush. The creature stopped 20 tails away. Its light slid across the leaves until it landed on the bush that held her and her mother. "Ah!" the voice screeched. "Eagle foxes! Butter and awesomes! Ice and rolls!" The light shined so bright Mia feared she'd never see darkness again. The air pulsed with Mia's heartbeat as the creature clomped toward her and her mom. It was as tall as a sapling and seemed to be having trouble getting through the dense forest. "Ficklestigs!" it screeched. "Naxy branches!" "Mama," Mia whispered. "Quiet. Can it fit in here? Hush, Mia." She led her to another nearby bush, dragging the silver root, just before the creature broke through the branches and swept its light around the clearing. "Weird jewel glow," it whined. "Cold mouth, cold mouth." "Mia, you must run," her mom whispered. "Go, now. Hide among the trees." "Mom, no, Once everything's quiet, you must continue to the far side of the forest and find a den. Sniff for sandy loam, a sipping creek, and an entrance with good cover, just like we had in the Evie Wood. Do you understand?" Mia's paw was too numb to move. It was her fault they'd come this way. She'd refused to enter the trees when her mom first asked, forcing them to travel where the silver roots bit down and never let go. "Through the forest, alone? I can't. Mama, you have to come with me." Her mom shifted a paw, making the silver root clink. "I can't come with you, Mia." "But you said you'd be there every step of the way. You lied to me." "I'm sorry, Mia. I never meant to lie." Her mom's golden eyes searched Mia's blue swirl ones in the flashes of approaching light. "But you have to go. You're the only kid left." "What do you mean, the only?" Mia asked. The creature tromped closer, burbling. It was 10 tails away now. "Mia," her mom said in a calmer voice now, "listen to me carefully. Sometimes there are fires in the field. Many animals will inhale the smoke. Many will die." The words made Mia tremble. "Why are you telling me this?" "Hush and listen. From the ashes, the wood and the grasses will grow back lusher, greener than before. They'll be populated with more things to eat. So while some animals may have died, later generations will live better for it. Do you understand?" Mia couldn't keep her jaws from shaking. "Mama." Her mom licked her cheek. "Tell me you understand." The thing crunched closer. "We've set a smell toy sigh here." I understand," Mia said. "Good." Tears streamed down her mom's cheek. "Now run. Run as fast as your paws can carry you." Mia bounded out of the bush, but then she felt a tug on her heartstrings. She nuzzled under a large leaf and peeked out from under it. If she left, then the creature who smelled of nothing would get her mom. Mia couldn't let that happen. She couldn't leave someone in her family behind again. The thing stomped into the clearing. "Ward ye not! Trig's here!" By the glow of the floating light, Mia finally saw the thing. It had no fur on its face or paws. Loose skins flapped around its body and, her heart jerked, the thing walked on 2 legs. Mia knew what it was now. Human. "It's no use being clever paws around a human," Miss Fix had said. "They are cleverer by a landslide. They will catch you with their traps, peel off your skin with their long fingers, and wear it around their naked necks to keep warm. If you ever see a human, Run! The human shined its light, following the silver root straight to the bush that hid Mia's mom. A growl awoke in Mia's throat as the human's hairless paw parted the leaves, unveiling her mom's red fur. Her mom snarled and yipped, jerking back, trying to get as far away from the human as she could. "Water delight," the human said, rubbing its paws together. No, not paws. Hands. With 5 fingers each, every one as deft as a baby snake. The human pulled out 2 hand skins and slid them over its own. It reached into the bush, and Mia's mom lashed, sinking her fangs into the skin covering the human's hand. The human didn't so much as wince, only clucked its tongue. "Imp fountain pennies!" The growl grew in Mia's throat as the human forced her mom's muzzle to the ground. With one hand, using the other to draw a gleaming splinter from the silver root's mouth, her mom's paw came free and the human hefted her into the air by the scruff. Mia's growl grew into a howl. "Let go of my mom!" She shot out from under the leaf and attacked the human's foot. The human made a surprised whoop and dropped Mia's mother to the ground. Mia didn't stop attacking. The foot's skin was as tough as bark, but if she could just bite hard enough, rip hard enough, she was confident she could kill it. "Mia!" her mom shouted. "Let go! Run!" Mia tried to let go of the human's foot, but her fangs caught on something stringy. Before she could untangle them, fingers seized her by the scruff, making her whole body freeze. And then she was being hefted into the air, up, 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 high as the branches. Mia dangled in front of the human's hideous face. It was made of loose frog belly skin that wiggled and stretched in strange, terrifying ways. "Wee wee, icky morsel!" The human breathed its strange sounds at her. "Otters breathed! Hee hee!" With the scruff pinched, Mia could only snarl. Below, her mom ripped at the loose skin around the human's legs. The human kicked her in the teeth, but Mom shook off the blow and bit down again. Mia's stomach lifted as the human swooped down to catch her mom with its other hand, but her mom dodged into the brush. "Very well," the human said, standing. It tried to step away, but Mia's mom kept nipping at its feet. Whenever the human reached down to grab her, she bounded off into the brush. Finally, the human crouched low, holding Mia out. "Flare? Eh?" it said. "Allures?" With its other hand, it reached toward Mia's mom. Mia's mom remained frozen behind the leaves, her injured paw curled to her chest. "Mama!" Mia cried. "Don't let it take me!" Her mom whimpered. She kept her distance. The human sighed. "Very well." It hefted Mia as high as the branches again and burbled as it carried her through the forest. Her mom limped behind them, trying to keep up on her injured paw. "I'll find you, Mia," her mom called. "Be brave!" But Mia was much too numb with fear to be anything. Soon her mom's sobs and sweet apple scent were swallowed by the leaves. An orange light bloomed through the elder trees. It shone from something that looked like a den but was built above ground. Its walls were made of stones and fallen trunks. It had a roof of dead grass. Black smoke billowed from its top, hazing the air and stinging Mia's eyes. "How's the tricks?" the human cried. Something was wrong with this place. No crickets chirped, no frogs croaked. There was no scuffle in the underbrush, as if the creatures of the wood knew to keep quiet here. The human carried Mia into the den and then closed it with a click, cutting off the scent of the trees. The walls danced with flames, a forest fire somehow contained within a small cave. Mia had only seen fire from a distance when lightning struck the great crooked tree. This close, the crackling flames burned her nose and dried her eyes, making the shape of the den blur together. She started panting with fear. "Fassing fur," the human said. Mia felt a snip behind her ear as the human stole a tuft of her hair. Then, carrying her by the scruff, it brought her to a nest of silver sticks. The sticks opened with a squeak and Mia fell inside. Another squeak and she found herself trapped. She tried to bite through the sticks, but they were made of the same impossible stuff as the root that had bitten her mom's paw. The human unfolded the outer skins from its body, releasing a scent like melting flowers. Its long white fingers hung the skins one by one on a dead brown tree. It turned, firelight flickering on its flat, naked face. Raspberries stained its lips, blueberries tinted its eyelids. A clump of silver hair sat atop its head, and it wore a golden flower at its throat. Mia sniffed. This human was female. Ah, the woman said in a breathy, bright voice. Much better. Mia's ear twitched. She could understand the human now. But how? The woman drew close and bared her teeth through the silver sticks. Hello there. She tapped the air a whisker from Mia's muzzle. I'd reach into your cage and pet you, but I'm afraid you'll nip my finger. You're shaking so. Mia howled for her mom. Arr! Oh, bup, the woman said. None of that now. Her round pupils moved up and down, taking in Mia's coat. You're a vixen, I believe. She wrinkled her nose, though I won't do either of us the indignity of checking. She walked to what looked like a hollow tree trunk and drew out something sharp and hooked. A silver claw that gleamed like moonlight on water. You're a surprise, you know, the woman said, and not a pleasant one, I'm afraid. She picked up a stone and ran it along the claw's edge. Shrink, shrink, shrink. The sound raised Mia's hackles. I'm not particularly partial to foxes, the woman continued. They're unpleasant creatures at the best of times, always murdering innocent ducks and mouses and little cherubs. That's what I call piglets, by the way. Shink, shink, shink. That's why foxes have always been the villains in my stories. Don't much appreciate villains myself. Mia kept her eyes on the silver claw. She was trying to follow the woman's words, but they didn't make any sense. Stories? Villains? Besides, the woman said, I already have a fox story, The Tale of Mr. Todd, and it was not popular amongst the littles. She set down the stone and gave the sharp edge of the claw a prick with her nail. I was hoping to catch a chubby chipmunk or a bunny or perhaps some pleasant forest critter I hadn't written about yet. She brought the claw to the cage. Mia cowered. There was nowhere to hide. My, but you are beautiful, aren't you? The woman said, hesitating. And young. Why, you're nothing but a kid. She tapped the claw against the silver sticks of Mia's cage, thinking, perhaps it is time for another fox story. My publisher might enjoy one that isn't so, well, nasty. She set down the claw with a clatter. Let's give it a try, shall we? Mia's ears twitched. Give what a try? Was the woman not going to steal her skin? How impolite of me, the woman said, clapping her hands together. I haven't made introductions. Her face drew too close to the cage again. My name is Beatrix Potter. Mia's ears flattened. She didn't care about the woman's name. She just wanted to leave. The woman tapped her lips, studying Mia's face. And I believe I'll call you Little Miss. Mia avoided the woman's eyes as Miss Potter again bared her teeth. I'm going to make it so that you live forever. After Miss Potter sang a bright good night, after she banished the light with a click, after the fire died with a crackle, it was only then that Mia was able to take in her surroundings. She pressed her nose between the silver sticks of her cage, trying to sniff out an escape. Moonlight poured through the hole in the den's wall, but she couldn't smell the trees or her mother's apple-scented fur. The wind and all its smells were held back by something as invisible as a fly's wing. Mia searched the den's other walls and found that they were impaled with forest things, mushrooms and feathers and leaves of different shapes. A hairy vine coiled in a circle. There were creatures, too, a yellow beetle no longer marching, a butterfly that did not flutter, as well as a bat, a frog, a lizard, all shriveled and still. The creatures were as scentless as dust, and Mia's stomach did not rumble at the sniff of them. She turned her nose upward to see if the den had a top exit, and her heart turned over. There, standing on a flat perch high in the den, was a large male fox. Keep away from unknown foxes, Miss Vix had warned. If you don't belong to them, they will snap your neck and leave your body for the worms. Mia didn't want her neck snapped, but the fox wouldn't be able to reach her in the cage. Besides, who else was going to help her? "Excuse me?" Mia whispered at the fox. He didn't respond, only stood proudly, sandy whiskers alert. "Hello?" she said. The fox gazed out over the den, eyes gleaming like black currants. He didn't so much as blink. "Sorry to interrupt," Miss Mia gulped. "You look very, busy, but I just want to find a way out of this nest. My mom's looking for me outside." A long silence followed. "No use talking to him." "Who's there?" Mia asked, searching the moonlit room. "Who said that?" "Just me," a pinched voice said. Mia sniffed but couldn't smell anything. She swiveled her ears until she caught the creature's whistling breath, its slow thumping heartbeat. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness in the corner, and she saw another silver cage like hers. Faint moonlight made squares on floppy ears, wide eyes, and brownish-gray fur. "Why can't I smell you?" Mia asked the rabbit. "That's what she does to you," he said in a tired voice. "She keeps us in these cages, feeding us nothing but oatmeal until our fur loses the smell of the forest." "Oh." Mia's heart pounded, flooding her head with more questions. "Why can't I smell the trees? How can I understand the human? Why can't I break these sticks?" The rabbit pointed his nose towards the hole in the den. "That's a window. It cannot be opened, not by us anyway. Only way out is through that door there." Mia sniffed at the entrance where Miss Potter had carried her in. It was blocked by a piece of wood that had shut with a click. "She rarely opens it," the rabbit said, "and she closes it twice as quickly." He sniffed. "As for why we can understand her, I don't rightly know. It was all gobbledygook and gibberish to my ears until she stole a little bit of my fur." He sniffed. "That was before she killed Sarah." Mia gulped. "Who's Sarah?" "My wife," the rabbit said. Something stirred inside Mia, but it was faint. It was difficult for her to feel pity for a rabbit. They died all the time. It was part of their nature. She decided to ask the question she feared the most. "Why won't the fox talk to me?" The rabbit's eyes shined. "Mr. Todd is not in his body anymore." She looked at the fox sitting perfectly still on the high perch. What do you mean?" "Well, he's there," the rabbit said, pointing his nose. "In the pages." On the wall above Mia's cage were several white leaves. The pages, as the rabbit had called them, had markings that show a little bit of nature, trees and rivers and skies, all captured in watery hues. The pages held a depth Mia felt she could leap into. She could escape the human den and go bounding down the little stone pathways through a tunnel of brambles past a field of carrots. And yet the pages were as flat as leaves. "What do you mean the fox is there?" Mia said, staring at the little strange worlds. "Where?" "In the page farthest from you." Mia squinted at the wall facing her. These pages were populated with creatures, a bullfrog, a bunny, a squirrel, as flat as the worlds that held them. But they weren't behaving like animals. They stood upright on their hind paws and wore extra skins just like the human. A duck wore a blue circle around her shoulders and carried a small nest of apples. A frog wore all white and used a long stick to whip a fish out of the pond. A badger wore gray and red skins and walked with a stick in its forepaw. He had a soft expression which Mia knew was impossible for a badger. Mia saw the fox with the sandy whiskers trapped in a page. He wore a green skin around his chest and foreleg and rested a paw on the shoulder of a dim-witted-looking duck. "Miss Potter doesn't like animals the way they are," the rabbit said, "so she changes them, makes them more like her." He pointed his nose toward a pile of sharpened sticks. "She starts by stealing your essences with her pencils. Once she's used them to draw you into her story, she'll have no use for your body." He nodded towards the tree trunk at something floppy and white. "She'll use that cloth to steal your breath, and then she pulls off your skin and stuffs it full of grass." and finally, she'll remove your eyes and replace them with shiny rocks. The fox's gaze glowed darkly above Mia's cage. She looked away. After that, the rabbit said, you'll be trapped in Miss Potter's stories forever. That's what happened to Sarah. She's the nice, gentle rabbit now. Mia stared at the fox on the page. He wasn't moving, wasn't breathing. His whiskers didn't twitch. He just stood, frozen, wrapped in skins, unable to take his paw from the head of the dim-witted duck, unable to hunt her. It was the same for the toad, who would never catch the fish, the duck, who would never eat the apples, and Sarah, the nice, gentle rabbit, poking her nose out of the greenery, unable to do anything but wait for her husband to join her. If Mia went to the watercolor world, then she'd never see her mom or siblings again. She shook the thought from her head. Rabbits were scared of everything. Their hearts were always in a panic, their eyes always wide with shock. Tell me the truth, Rabbit, she snarled, trying to sound more frightening than frightened, or else I'll rip out your throat. The rabbit gave her a pitying look, and Mia realized that there was a bit of fear in his droopy eyes. I was like you once, he said. I kicked and kicked at my cage until I thought my legs might break. Then Miss Potter filled my belly with oatmeal, and it made me old and slow. Mia looked at the fox with sandy whiskers. Tell me he's lying. The fox's eyes only glowed. Once Miss Potter finishes drawing your story, the rabbit said, that's when you'll know it's your time. No! Mia attacked the sticks with renewed energy. I have to get out of here. My mom's out there. The rabbit tucked his paw under his chest, warming them from the night. He turned his nose toward the pages lying on top of his cage. She finished my story this afternoon. Tomorrow she'll bring the jar and the cloth, and then I'll become just like Mr. Todd. He lay in his cage, turning his back to Mia. At least I'll be with Sarah again. Mia's breath grew short. Was that how she would end up? Stuck inside one of these watercolor worlds forever? Her skin stuffed, her glowing eyes staring out of the window, waiting for her mom to come and find her? Wait! Mia called to the rabbit. How do I get out of here? But the rabbit was fast asleep. A sound drew Mia out of sleep. Dawn shined through the speckles of the window, glinting off the silver sticks of her cage. She remembered where she was. An angry grunt made her sit upright. Miss Potter was crouched over the rabbit's cage. There now, the woman said, slipping on her hand skins. No use in fussing. Mia's heart started to thrum in her throat. Miss Potter reached into the rabbit's cage and hefted him out by his floppy ears. His legs kicked, his heart thumped, his breath ruffled. Normally the sound would fill Mia with hunger, but right then it made every one of her hairs stand on end. It's okay, Miss Potter cooed to the struggling rabbit. It'll all be okay soon. She took the brown jar from the tree trunk, along with a loose white something. The cloth, Mia realized. With one hand, Miss Potter opened the jar and tipped it onto the cloth. A scent wafted through the den. It tickled Mia's nostrils, making her head feel woozy, her eyelids heavy. Here we are, Miss Potter said. She pressed the damp cloth over the rabbit's nose while turning her head away. The rabbit made a muffled grunting. His legs kicked. His heart thumped faster and faster as his gaze frantically searched the room. He found Mia. She watched in horror as the rabbit's eyelids slowly drifted shut and his legs fell limp. When Miss Potter removed the cloth, his breath was gone, along with his heartbeat. Oh, the woman said with a little bit of heartbreak. I do hate it when they make those little sounds. She laid out the rabbit's body and picked up the silver claw. Mia looked away just as his stomach opened wetly. The room thickened with a steamy red scent, making her teeth clack. But whether out of fear or hunger, she wasn't sure. She looked up through her cage as the fox with the sandy whiskers. The rabbit had been right. Mr. Todd had nothing inside his soul. Miss Potter had trapped him inside a page and then stolen his eyes and stuffed his body with grass. Mia's heart beat in her ears now. She looked back just as Miss Potter lifted the dripping insides of the rabbits, streams of blood running down her arms. "Pew," the woman said. She opened a window with her elbow and then slopped the bunny's innards outside. Mia pressed her nose through her cage, sniffing at the trees, the wind, the soil. This was it. She needed to escape, otherwise she'd end up just like Mr. Todd and the rabbit. She could almost feel the cold of the silver claw opening her belly. She gnawed at the silver sticks of the cage, trying to get them to snap, but it was no use. The bunny's innards disposed of, Miss Potter summoned a small waterfall and cleaned the blood from her hands. Then she stepped to what looked like a black boulder and picked up a small stick. There came a brisk scratch, and a flame gasped to life, tingling Mia's nostrils. Fire. The human could make fire. Miss Potter grew distracted, using the waterfall to fill a pot big enough for Mia to fit inside. Mia watched as the flame crept down the stick to Miss Potter's fingers. The woman hissed like a snake, jerking her hand, and the flame leapt onto the floor. "Ah! Ah! Ah!" Miss Potter cried, stamping on the fire until it was extinguished. She went to the window and waved the smoke out of her with her hands. When that didn't clear it, she opened the front door, wafting fresh air into the den. Miss Potter wiped the sweat from her forehead. "Oh, Beatrix," she said, laughing, "you really can be such a goose sometimes. You're meant to cook the rabbit, not yourself." The smoke cleared, and she shut the door and the window. Now all that was left was the trapped air laced with ash. Mia's nose ached to sniff the trees again. Miss Potter scratched another flame to life and touched it to the boulder, which whooshed with a circle of fire. She lifted the water-filled pot over it, and soon steam coiled. Once the water started to bubble, Miss Potter dropped the rabbit's empty skin inside. She created another fire and tossed his glistening meat over it. The room filled with the eye-watering smells. A hunger growled inside Mia as she try as she might to fight it. The rabbit's meat would fill her with energy. She might even be strong enough to break these silver sticks. She paced her cage, whimpering and licking her lips. "Enough fidgeting, little miss," Miss Potter said. "Your breakfast is coming." Once the meat had grown crisp and glistening, the woman served it to herself. Then she walked to Mia's cage and opened it with a creak. "Here's your oatmeal." She set a shell of pale, burbling mud next to Mia and then closed the door. Mia sniffed at the oatmeal, then sneezed. It was as scentless as mud, just like she would become if she ate it. As Miss Potter feasted on the rabbit's meat, making satisfying sounds and slurping the fat from her fingers, Mia tucked herself into a ball in the corner of her cage. She had disobeyed her mom and not gone into the forest when she was supposed to, and now she would pay the price. Miss Potter would steal her scent, then her essence, then her breath, and her skin. The woman would feast on Mia's meat while Mia watched, helpless, from a leaf-flat watercolor world. The rabbit eaten, Miss Potter cleaned the grease from her hands in the small waterfall and then impaled a new page above the rabbit's empty cage. "There!" she exclaimed. "The story of a fierce, bad rabbit. It's far from my best work, but it'll pay the bills." She used a stick to fish out the rabbit's skin from the streaming pot, and then opened the front door and hung it to dry. Mia stared at the new drawing above the empty cage. The rabbit with the floppy ears fled through the flat world in terror, forever running from some unseen danger. Whatever it was had stolen his tail and whiskers. Mia could have sworn she saw the drawing's nose twitch. Night fell, and a spindly moon rose in the window. Mia pretended to sleep while Miss Potter blew out the tiny flames around the room. Footsteps approached the cage, and the latch squeaked open. Miss Potter clicked her tongue. What a waste! She removed the uneaten oatmeal and then closed the latch again. She hadn't noticed that one of Mia's eyes were not perfectly shut. Once Miss Potter was safely tucked away in her room, Mia sat up. A sliver of moonlight gleamed on the cage's silver latch. She'd watched through the crack in her eyelid as Miss Potter had opened it. All Mia had to do was lift. She poked her nose through the square directly below the latch and tried to muzzle it upward. But the space was too tight. The silver sticks cut her muzzle. She pulled her nose out to lick the ache away and realized something. She slid her nose back into the square and licked. Her tongue lifted the latch. The cage creaked open, and Mia hunched, waiting to see if the sound had woken Miss Potter. Snoring drifted from the other room. Mia bounded out of the cage and crept across the floor, nails clicking as she sniffed for an escape. Mr. Todd's glowing eyes seemed to follow her around the room. "Stop staring at me," she whispered to him. She padded to the den's entrance. Its latch was much too high to lick open, so she sniffed the narrow space around its edges. She could smell squirrels and acorns and leaves and streams. The breath of the forest was a whisker away, but she couldn't figure out how to reach it. She caught an apple scent and her tail started to wag. "Meow," Mia said, making the smallest yelp she could. A few moments later, the sniff came from under the door. "Mia? Mom!" She could smell her mother's breath through the crack beneath the door, the same air pulled between their nostrils. "Oh, thank goodness," her mom said, sobbing with relief. "You're alive. I'm sorry it took me so long to find you. I moved slowly on 3 paws. Are you okay?" "She's going to take my skin," Mia said. "She's going to cook me and replace my eyes and trap me in one of those pages." "Slow down, honey. You can tell me all about it later. Right now, we need to get you out of there." Mia scratched at the door, whimpering. "This is the only way out. The rabbit told me before, Miss Potter, before she took his—" "It's going to be okay, Mia," her mom said. But Mia could hear panic in her voice. "Can you reach that hole? I can't jump with my injured paw." Mia looked at the window. Maybe the rabbit hadn't been right about everything. The window was as invisible as a fly's wing. Wings could be crunched. She trotted to the space where Miss Potter had skinned the rabbit. She fixed her eyes on the moon in the window and, bounding across the room, made a great leap. Thump! Her nose struck the wall just beneath the window, surprising a yelp out of her. She recovered and crouched in the shadows of the skin tree, muzzle aching, ears alert. Miss Potter snored in her room. Mia decided to try again, this time pushing the air out of her lungs so she wouldn't make a sound. She ran and leapt and thump! She pawed at her bruised muzzle and then returned to the door. "My legs aren't long enough." Her mother took a breath. "Can you find another way out?" Mia sniffed. The only other way out was the hall, in the dark space where Miss Potter went to sleep. "I can try," Mia said, breath shaking. "I'll be right here," her mom said. The door to Miss Potter's room was open just a crack. Mia muzzled it wider and sniffed the darkness. The woman snoozed softly. There was no window. Mia was about to go back, but then shapes started to form in the darkness. Claws, fangs, glowing eyes. The room was filled with dead animals, frozen in hideous poses, eyes popping out of their empty skins. Mia recognized the characters from Miss Potter's pages. There were the squirrel, the duck, and the bullfrog. There was the badger, claws in the air, jaws locked in an internal hiss. And there was Sarah, the rabbit's wife, eyes sparkling with never-ending fear. Trembling, Mia backed up. Her tail bumped into something, knocked an object to the ground where it shattered. "Huh?" The sound stirred Miss Potter, who sat bolt upright. She snatched something from her bedside and clicked it. A beam of light blared across the room, nearly catching Mia's tail as she slipped out of the door. Mia leapt into her cage and caught the door with her teeth. She yanked back, and the latch clicked shut just as the woman stomped into the room. The light shined on Mia, making her squint. "Mia!" Mia's mom called from the outside. "Mia, tell me you're okay!" Miss Potter pointed her light out the window. "Who's making that racket?" Mia's mom fell silent. Miss Potter killed the light with a click, scratched her chin, and returned to her room. Mia trembled in her cage, the image of the empty-eyed creature still wild in her mind. And not only because they were stuffed. The duck had wings for flying, the badger had jaws for chomping, even Sarah had long legs for kicking. and yet none of them had been able to escape before Miss Potter stole their essence and their skin. What chance did a fox have? The sun rose and set in the window more times than Mia could count. The days blended together in a stale blur, slowly leaching the terror from her heart and replacing it with something she'd never felt before. Boredom. Every morning, Miss Potter swept into the room, wafting her melted flower scent and talking to herself. Make the tea, make the tea. After the water howled in pain, she would throw open the window to let the weather in. Mia could smell her mom outside, patiently waiting for the night to come. As sunlight filled the human den, Miss Potter would use the silver claw to sharpen her pencils and then sit before Mia's cage, scritching shapes onto her pages. Scritch, scritch, scritch. I've always said that one must see, smell, and touch one's subjects. Screech, screech. Well, perhaps not smell. Not when one's subject is a skunk or a badger or some scandalous character like that. Screech. Still, I've always said, Beatrix, you must know how fog smells, how frost tastes before you draw it. Day after day, as Mia watched her own form take shape on the pages, she thought she could feel her personality slowly seeping out of her paws. In the afternoon, Miss Potter placed what looked like clear puddles over her eyes and studied her work. These are turning out quite well, if I do say so myself. And ahead of deadline, too. I should be finished with you in just a few more days. Mia tried not to think about what this meant. Instead, she lay on her side and watched the branches scratch at the windows, trying to remember what it felt like to curl up beneath them. As the sky began to fade, Miss Potter would serve herself duck or rabbit and Mia a steaming bowl of oatmeal. The smell of sizzling meat squeezed Mia's stomach until she was forced to take tiny licks at the tasteless mud, choking down every last bit. In the evening, Miss Potter would shut the window, cutting off the wind and the leaves and Mia's mom's apple scent. Then she would light a fire in the small cave, putting a flicker in Mr. Todd's eye. Well, I'm spent, Miss Potter would say once the flames had faded to embers. Good night, little miss. Sleep tight. With that, she would slip into her room, and Mia would be left alone in the moon, with the moon in the shadows and Mr. Todd's glowing gaze. When all was quiet, she would lick open the latch and lie by the door, and her mother would whisper soothing things through the cracks while Mia pretended not to hear the tears in her voice. And finished, Miss Potter sang out one evening. She sat in front of Mia's cage, only this time she did not bring her pencils to scritch with. Instead, she brought several pages which she tapped into a neat pile on her lap. This is only a rough draft, mind. I'm still working out the details. She studied the pages. And I didn't quite get your eyes right, I'm afraid. You always look so dour. She took a deep breath, then held up the first page. It showed a picture of Mia, only, like the other watercolor animals, she stood on her hind paws. She carried a nest filled with strawberries and wore a fluffy white dress like the one Miss Potter wore. A soft white something covered her head, save her ears, which stuck out on top. Miss Potter cleared her throat and spoke in a pinched voice. In the Northlands, there was a valley of fog, most white, with the golden tops of trees poking through. And in those trees lived a young fox kit. Her name was Little Miss. Mia tried folding her paws over her ears, but they kept springing up. Had the fox with the glowing eyes listened to the tale of Mr. Todd? Was this the last thing he ever did? Miss Potter proceeded to tell the tale of a young vixen whose two naughty brothers were always getting into trouble. After the brothers snuck into a farm to hassle some chickens, the angry old farmer swore to shoot off their tails. The words stirred something in Mia, and she tilted an ear. The clever little miss managed to convince the farmer that the blood on her brothers' muzzles was nothing more than strawberry jam. In the end, the farmer left, scratching his head, and the fox kits made it home in time for their parents to lick their cheeks goodnight. The end, Miss Potter said, turning over the last page. She bared her teeth at Mia. And now, little miss, you shall live forever in the hearts and minds of children everywhere. Mia sniffed at the pages. Maybe living in a watercolored world wouldn't be so bad. She could remain in a story where she saved her siblings from the evils of the world until the end of time, just as she feared she'd fail to do in the Evie Wood. Well, Miss Potter said, what do you think? It may not be as exciting as the old tales with Peter, but I enjoy it. And to think we turned a tricksy fox into a hero. She wrinkled her nose in that way that Mia had come to learn wasn't a snarl. I think someone deserves a treat. She went to the kitchen and then brought back a raw piece of meat, which she tossed into the cage. Mia stared at it. Did this belong to the rabbit? Well, Miss Potter said, go on then. Mia sniffed at the meat. She didn't touch it. Grown used to my oatmeal, have you? Miss Potter said. Good. Hunters are such nasty creatures. She removed the meat and sighed. Well, no use in avoiding the inevitable. She collected the cloth and the jar and the silver claw, blowing away the pencil dust. Then she reached for the skin tree, paused, and frowned around the room. Now where have my gloves run off to? She disappeared into her bedroom. Mia licked open the cage latch and bounded to the door. Mom! She howled. You have to save me! She's going to do it right now! A moment later, her mom scratched at the door. What can I do? I don't know what to do. Mia whimpered. Her mom was supposed to have all the answers. Mia searched the house, thinking. The window was too high, the door was blocked. Miss Potter had taken the sleeping liquid with her. And then she saw the answer. A minute later, Miss Potter swept back into the room, pulling on her gloves. I heard you whimpering, little miss, and I'm sorry about this, but there's no use in making it any more difficult than it already is. When she turned around, Mia was back in her cage. Miss Potter poured the sleeping liquid over the cloth and then opened the cage with a gloved hand. Mia tried to leap out, but the woman caught her by the scruff, making Mia's spine bend and her paws dangle helplessly. Miss Potter frowned. Just know that I'm no happier about this than you are. She pressed the cloth over Mia's muzzle and looked away. The woozy scent shot up Mia's nose. Her eyes watered over. The walls started to melt and bend. Just before everything fell to darkness, the smell was gone. What's this? Miss Potter said in a high-pitched voice. She dropped Mia half-conscious back in her cage and closed it. Mia was barely able to keep her heavy eyelids open, but she watched through blurry lashes as Miss Potter went to her desk and picked up a drawing of Little Miss. A stream of pee trickled off it, smearing the pencil work. What happened? Miss Potter said, horrified. She searched the room for the culprit, never dreaming that Mia could have let herself out of her cage and then put herself back. Mia wanted to howl to her mother to let her know that she was still alive, but she could barely stay awake. Her head felt full of stones. She couldn't feel her paws. Her eyelids kept drifting shut without her permission. Miss Potter let out a frustrated sound as she crumbled the paper and threw it in the trash. Well, she said, cleaning her hands in the small waterfall and then violently flicking droplets from her fingers. I suppose we'll have to start over tomorrow. She went to the light switch and scowled at Mia's cage. Get a good night's sleep, little miss, and do try not to look so dour in the morning. She flicked off the light and then disappeared into her room. There was a scratching at the door. Mia! Her mom howled. Are you there? What did she do to you? Mia tried to swim out of sleep, but the walls couldn't hold their shape. The silver sticks wavered in and out of focus. Her eyes fell shut again. Mia! Her mom called, scratching. Mia jerked awake. She needed to lick open the latch. She needed to let her mom know she was still alive. But she couldn't lift her head. Her tongue hung heavy in her mouth. Mia, please, answer me! As the half moon fell behind the trees, Mia's mom began to sob. Her mom couldn't smell her, couldn't hear her. She thought Mia was nothing more than skin and pencil etchings. After a long silence, her mom scratched at the door one last time. "I love you, Mia." And Mia could do nothing except lie and listen as her mother said a tearful, howling goodbye and then hopped off into the night. Mia's heart beat too slow to break. That night, Mia had a watercolor nightmare. She stood in the Evie wood on her hind legs, holding a nest of peaches and centipedes. She was looking for her siblings so she could feed them. A yelp echoed through the wood as Roa sprinted through the brambles, trying to escape the gooey-eyed Miss Fix. Mia wanted to help her brothers, but her paws wouldn't move. Even her whiskers refused to twitch. All she could do was stand and watch as Roa ran for his life, her teeth bared in a frozen smile. "What a lovely morning," Miss Potter said, bursting into the room the next day. Mia lay in her cage. Her head was still woozy from the sleeping cloth, but it was her broken heart that kept her from getting up. Her mom had left her for dead. "I was thinking, little miss," Miss Potter said, whisking around the room, collecting her pencil and paper. "Because we have to start over again, this might be the perfect opportunity to really get the story right. To return to the good old days where my books were urgent and frightening and sold like hotcakes." Mia didn't budge. Maybe her mom had been right to leave her. Mia may have saved herself a few days by peeing on those pictures, but she still couldn't open the front door. Miss Potter grabbed the silver claw and sharpened a pencil. "We'll get back to Once Upon a Time and Happily Ever After. Why, this latest project has the potential to be even more popular than Peter." Her face crumpled. She dropped the pencil and the silver claw and then hid in her hands. Her body shuddered with sobs, and she collapsed into a chair. Mia was so startled she sat upright. Miss Potter recovered herself with a sniff. Her eyes glistened as she spun a circle of silver around her finger. "Who am I kidding? I gave up on Happily Ever After when my Mr. Warren died." Her breath caught. "Oh, Norman." She dabbed at her face, smearing the blueberry tint from her eyes and smudging the red on her lips. Mia smelled the woman's salty tears and wondered if she too had lost her den. Miss Potter ran her fingers along Mia's cage. "Perhaps you miss someone too, She sniffed. "That fox I caught before you." Some would say that that's a ridiculous notion, that animals don't have feelings, and yet Miss Fix had warned Mia and her siblings that meeting eyes with another animal would result in a fight, be it with a sibling or a badger. But staring into Miss Potter's eyes made Mia's heart thump with something other than fear. This human seemed as sad as she was. Keeping Mia's gaze, Miss Potter slowly slid her fingers through the silver sticks of the cage. Mia's paw lifted to move, but then came to rest again. The woman's fingers glided on either side of Mia's ear and then softly came together. The touch sent a trickle of warmth from her ear right to the hairless tip of her tail. "Perhaps I'll make you my pet," Miss Potter whispered. "Would you like that? We could keep each other company through the long nights." Mia delicately parted her teeth and gave the woman's finger a lick. Her skin tasted of milk. Miss Potter smiled sadly. "I think I know something that will cheer us both up." She lifted the latch and opened the cage. Mia's ears perked. Was Miss Potter going to let her go? Mia's mom might still be nearby. She could still catch her apple scent. Her paws kneaded the cage, uncertain of whether to jump out or not. Miss Potter went to her bedroom and then returned with a white cloth. Mia pressed into the back of her cage, whimpering. "No need for that, little miss," Miss Potter said. "It's just a bonnet. Do you know what a bonnet is?" Mia didn't. The rabbit had never mentioned it. She didn't dare sniff at the thing in case it stole her breath again. "See," Miss Potter said, poking her fingers through 2 slits in the cloth. "These are for your ears. Now, hold still." She pressed the cloth close, and Mia turned her nose away, a growl building in her throat. "Oh, come now," Miss Potter said. "You and I are getting along so well. Besides, it gets drafty in this old house at night. This might keep warmth in. And you look quite handsome." The cloth came the cloth came closer still, nearly reaching Mia's muzzle. Thoughts overwhelmed her. Miss Potter had changed her mind. She would clamp the cloth over Mia's nose, and Mia's legs would kick and kick until they fell limp and never kicked again. Then Miss Potter would scoop out her insides and replace her eyes with stones, and she'd wake up in a watercolor nightmare where she'd never see her mom or her real siblings again. "That's it," Miss Potter said, pressing the cloth closer. Mia lashed, her fangs tearing through Miss Potter's delicate skin. Eee! The woman stumbled backwards, blood streaming down her arm. Mia leapt out of the cage and sprinted to the front door, scratching at it, trying to get it to open. "Mom! Mom!" she cried. "I'm here! I'm alive! Come back!" Mia sensed something behind her ears and ducked right before Miss Potter could grab her. She slipped through the woman's skirts and ran into the kitchen. Mia saw the brown jar on the counter. Before Miss Potter could reach it, Mia leapt, knocking the jar with her paws, sending it shattering across the floor. The scent flooded the house, making Mia's head heavy, her paws start to drag. The hand seized her by the ears. She was yanked painfully upward, yowling over and over again until she was hurled back into her cage. The latch snapped shut. Miss Potter hacked and coughed and waved her hand as she mopped up the spilled liquid. When the last of it was down the sink, she looked at the blood streaming down her arm. She turned and stared at Mia. The woman wore a new face now. Her skin twisted on her skull. The red on her lips was smeared. Her hair hung like dead weeds. "I see," Miss Potter said in a dark voice. She went to her desk and grabbed little Miss's surviving pages, smearing them with blood. "I should never have trusted a predator. Nasty, nasty things." She grabbed a match. "I refuse to lead my young readers astray." She lit the match and touched its flame to the pages, making them crackle and burn bright. The pictures of little Miss curled and blackened and then ended in ash. Miss Potter tossed the burning pages into the sink and opened the front door. "I'll be back with more ether," she said, and slammed the door shut. Mia whimpered. She could still taste the woman's blood on her teeth. The sky was still blue when the moon rose pale and full in the window. Now that Mia's pages were burned, where would she end up? She imagined her empty skin wandering lonely through the forest, searching for her mother. The skin had no eyes to see. It had no tongue to call out. When the skin remembered that it didn't have a heart to care whether it found its mom or not, it fell to the ground and never got up again. Mia stared through the top of her cage at Mr. Todd. "How do I get out of here?" she whispered. The fox's eyes glowed with dusk. Mia followed his gaze to the rack where Miss Potter hung her extra skins. What could Mia do with that? She looked back at the fox and her heart skipped a beat. Had his muzzle turned? Or were the shadows playing tricks? Mr. Todd's eyes seemed to be pointed slightly to the left now. She followed his gaze to the stove. "What are you trying to tell me?" she asked, looking from the skin tree to the stove. Mia remembered Miss Potter squawking like a bird after she'd accidentally dropped the match on the floor. The woman may have been able to make fire, but she still feared it. And when the flame leapt where it didn't belong, she had opened the door to let the smoke out. Mia's whiskers ticked up. "Thank you," she whispered to the fox. She licked open the latch. The front door creaked open and Miss Potter stepped inside, closing it behind her. "They were out of ether," she said. "We'll have to do this the unpleasant way, I suppose." Mia drew her muzzle back into the shadow under the skin tree. Her back was nestled beneath its arched roots. She waited. There came the hiss of gas, the strike of a match, and the whoosh of flames. Next came the waterfall filling the pot, then the sharpening of the silver claw. Shink, shink, shink. Mia peeked beneath the coats as Miss Potter approached her cage. The woman gasped when she found it empty. "Little miss," Miss Potter said. Her steps grew more careful. "Little miss." As soon as Miss Potter's toes were pointed away, Mia aimed her nose toward the firelit stove and pushed up on her hind legs, pressing her back into the arched roots of the skin tree. The rack barely budged. Miss Potter huffed. "Where has that little devil gone off to?" Mia pressed up again. The rack moved momentarily, and the skin swayed toward the stove. But then the whole thing rocked back, painfully squishing her tail. Mia stifled a yelp. come out, wherever you are," Miss Potter sang, brandishing the silver claw and circling the room. The skin tree teetered back and forth. When it tipped toward the stove again, Mia pushed up with everything she had, and the tree finally toppled, its skins falling with it. The top of the tree knocked the pot from the stove, and the skins landed on the flames. They started to smoke. "My coats!" Miss Potter screamed. She ran and swept the smoldering skins off the stove, stomping out the fire. A great cloud of smoke billowed to the ceiling, darkening the room. It stung Mia's eyes and tickled her lungs, but the smell filled her with hope. The fire extinguished, Miss Potter ran, coughing, toward the front door. Mia followed like a shadow, careful to keep clear of the silver claw in the woman's hand. When the door flew open, Mia shot under the woman's skirts and between her feet toward freedom. Her tail brushed Miss Potter's ankle and the woman screamed. A toe struck Mia's muzzle. A heel stabbed her tail. Everything became a tangle of legs and skirts and shrieks. Mia managed to slip out into the open, but found she was still inside. Her nose was no longer pointed toward the door. "Rah!" Miss Potter screamed. There came a whistling through the air, and Mia bounded away just before the silver claw could slice off her ear. She slipped into the first shadow she could find and cowered. "Where did you go?" In the shadows, Mia caught her breath. She'd been so close, but now Miss Potter was between her and the door. If she tried to escape, the woman would swing the silver claw, and that would be that for Mia. "I believe that little devil purposefully set my kitchen on fire." Miss Potter stalked around the room, snarling to herself. "Now where is she?" Mia watched the woman's heels stab around the room. She hoped with every beat of her heart for a clear path to the open door. Miss Potter kicked furniture, flipped over chairs, and whipped the tablecloth to the floor, huffing, searching. Mia cowered as Miss Potter bent at the hips with a grunt, peering under the sink, the table, the cabinet. "Aha!" she said, crouching near the bookcase. "Found you!" She seized the tail that stuck out from the shadows and gave it a tug. Before Miss Potter realized that she was pulling on Mr. Todd's tail, Mia bounded toward the open door, but just as she was about to leap outside, her nose smooshed against something soft, something invisible, and it bounced her backward. Mia stared in shock. There was nothing in the doorway. She couldn't pass through it. Had Miss Potter already trapped her in a story? Had Mia struck the border of the page? "Thank goodness," Miss Potter said, tossing Mr. Todd aside. "The screen caught you." "Screen?" Mia squinted at the entrance, and she saw the silver sticks, as tiny as hairs, making squares the size of bugs' eyes. Her heart sank. Miss Vix had warned her. For all of Mia's trickery, humans were cleverer by a landslide. A sharp heel stomped on Mia's tail. Her yelp was cut short when a rope slipped around her throat, jerking her upward until she dangled before the naked face of Miss Potter. "Monstrous thing," the woman spat. Mia's eyes watered. Her legs twitched helplessly. She couldn't breathe. Miss Potter kicked open the screen and hauled Mia, dangling by her neck, outside. "I should never have trusted a fox," the woman said. She tossed the rope's end around a stick that stuck out from the den's side, just like the one that held the rabbit's skin. Mia stopped struggling as the light in her eyes began to fade. Her last thought before everything went dark was that she didn't even get to say goodbye to her siblings. Somewhere in the antler wood, leaves rattled without wind. The little one shifted her paws, making sure her skin was still on tight. No such thing as stealing eyes, she told herself. No such thing as tree-tall things with no fur. No such thing as watercolor nightmares. Wait, the beta said. Is Mia okay? She didn't die, did she? Patience, the storyteller said. The little one was really starting to hate that word. Hey, the third kit said to the fifth. Your fur's pretty soft. I wonder if Miss Potter will come humming for you tonight. A shiver whipped the fifth kit, Mars, right up to his paws. I'm hungry, he said, curled his tongue, trying a yawn. I mean sleepy. Good night. He waddled toward home. The third one grinned and stepped on a branch, snapping it. The sound startled Mars, who sprinted, leapt over a log, and then belly-flopped in a bed of lilies. The alpha chuckled. Good one. 4 little foxes. We're ready for the next part, the beta said. More than ready, the third said. The little one wanted to follow Mars all the way home. But she had to find out what happened to Mia. She just had to. She lay on her paws so they wouldn't be tempted to run. We return to the Boulder Fields, the storyteller said, to the forest edge where Yulie has been sitting, waiting for his mother to come and collect him.